A few months ago, EnGenius sent me a couple of their wireless access points that's part of their mid-size to enterprise product line. Those wireless access points are cloud controlled only, which for enterprises may be great because if they want to remotely manage their network infrastructure. But they said at that time that they would send me a couple network switches to try out as well, and that time has actually come. They sent me a couple of these that's part of their same mid-size to enterprise product line. But the interesting thing about the network switches is that they told me that you can actually locally control them or cloud control them. So there's an option to locally control all of the network switches. So that's kind of interesting that their wireless access points are cloud managed, and the switches can have both options. So I'm going to take a look at both of those options and show you how to configure them that way. The nice thing about these switches, even though these are only 1 gigabit switches, but they're both support PoE. One of the switches is actually considered like an extender switch, because is what they're calling it, because it's just a PoE powered switch, which also can provide PoE on its ports to other devices. This is kind of neat if you just need a couple extra ports in maybe a remote location. So I think I actually might use this at my desk to get a couple of PoE ports without having to have a huge switch that's loud and has a bunch of fans. And even though these switches are only 1 gigabit switches, there's nothing crazy or fancy about them, but I still appreciate having them because I want to be able to, try out the, EnGenius ecosystem, so you can see if you actually like that ecosystem as well. But also, it gives me the opportunity to do other videos on how to configure VLANs for different vendor switches. That way, I have a good sampling and variety of many popular brands of switches, and I'll be able to create guides for all of those. So the first one I'm going to unbox is the switch they're actually calling a switch extender is what they call it, but it's actually just a PD port switch extender. So they call it PD powered switches. The entire switch is powered by PoE from another switch. You already have to connect it to another switch to connect it to your network anyway. So it's great when you can have the power also running to it. So let's open this up. If I can get it out. I have it in this cardboard box. That's always a struggle, isn't it? Sometimes it's like, okay, there we go. All right, it looks like in this nice little foam padding here. So let's open that up. Oh, it comes out the side, not the top. All right, so it looks like we get a little quick start card here that you can scan to get started. And there's also a code for a mobile app, which is probably what you'd want to do if you want to. You can add EnGenius devices to your cloud account using the mobile app, or you can use the web browser. The mobile app is the most convenient, of course, because you can scan the codes. Otherwise, you have to type in the serial numbers. So as you can see, I'm just taking a look at it. It's just your kind of a basic gigabit switch. You can have 4 ports here, and then this blue port is where you plug it into your other switch that's PoE. So this provides PoE power to this switch, and then it provides power to 4 additional ports. The amount of power on these ports, it probably won't be as high as it would be as if you're actually plugging this into the wall. It probably can't support a lot of power per port. I'd have to look that up. But, you have to keep that in mind. You can't put a lot of high power devices probably in this, but most likely if you're doing like cameras or some other PoE devices, you got some Raspberry Pis or whatever you want to plug into this, I think that would work out pretty well. It looks like to me that these kind of switches, of course, are typically fanless. I just see vents in it, and I don't really see any fans. So that's nice. So I like these kind of switches, especially the little tiny PoE powered ones. That's one advantage of getting a small PoE switch versus a large one. All of the bigger PoE switches have fans in them that are kind of loud because they need to keep it cool with all the power distribution that's inside. All right, so now we're going to do the big switch, and this is just like an 8-port PoE switch, so it doesn't have like a ton of ports on it, but it's a lot larger than the other one, so it's a full-size rack mount. And most likely this one is going to be able to handle a lot more power than, of course, that little basically a 4-port. It's 5 if you count the PoE in. Let's see. Wow. There we go. Man, the struggle is real. All right. So looks like to me, you of course get a quick start guide as well with that one. And we have, most likely here's your power supply here. All right. Gotta take off the styrofoam. All right. All right. So, and here's this network switch. As you can see, you have the console port. Most business enterprise switches have a console port. And then we got LED mode, which this LED mode, my TP-Link switch has something like this too, where you can flip between activity versus PoE powered ports. So that kind of gives you a quick view of which ports have PoE power, because they'll light up different based on this mode. So if you want to see network activity, you push the button. If you want to see PoE powered devices at a glance, you just push that button. And there's a little reset button you just push if you need a factory reset. And then we have your 8 PoE ports that we have here. And then there's 2 additional, these are like used for if you want to uplink to other switches, but there's 2 gigabit Ethernet and there's 2 gigabit SFP ports. So it's actually kind of interesting that it's not 4 SFP, it's actually 2 SFP and 2 Ethernet. So it kind of allows you to uplink using Ethernet or SFP. So it kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility there if you don't want to have to use any modules to convert anything. And it's kind of nice in a way because you don't have to waste any of your PoE ports if you want to uplink via Ethernet. A lot of people will use SFP for fiber or DAC cables, direct attach copper. So most people are going to probably use that. That's usually what I like to use to link switches together. And especially switches that have, where these are 10 gigabit, you definitely want to take advantage of, maximizing bandwidth between your devices or servers or those sorts of things. And as you can tell, like on the back here, there is a fan in this. Unlike the other switch, which is smaller, doesn't really need that extra fan and cooling. But there's only one fan here, so I'm hoping this one won't be quite as loud as like a 24 port or 48 port PoE switch, because they can get pretty loud. And then of course there's your power connector. So nothing too crazy here. That box that I have probably will have the rack ears in it and the power supply. So let's look at that real quick. You can see it comes with rack ears. It comes with feet, because some people just set it on shelf or something. You can actually just put rubber feet on the bottom if you just want to set it out somewhere. And let's see. There's the screws for the rack ears. Power cord, of course. And it actually comes with a console cable, which is pretty cool because I haven't seen very many switches actually come with a console cable. You actually get basically Ethernet on one side, and then it's just a COM port on the other side. So this is a way you can actually program your switch without having to be connected to it via your normal Ethernet connection. So that's it for the unboxing. I want to show how you actually manage these devices, whether directly or through the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you logging into standalone mode is what they call it. And it's just the built-in web interface, which is nice, which means you can locally manage these switches, as I mentioned earlier. So the default username and password is admin and password, which is kind of old school. They don't have a randomized password like some of these newer devices, but it's going to force you to change it, so it doesn't really matter anyway. So let's just go ahead and just put a password in here. Sign in. We'll say never save. Okay. After you log in, you'll be redirected to the dashboard page, which gives you some useful information about your network switch, like your firmware version, if you just need to look at that real quick, as well as the total PoE power utilization by port and some VLAN information down here at the bottom. And you can see at the top here, there's a little button for this port. So this way you can get quick access to see what ports are actually plugged in. Right now, it's just one port's plugged in. One of the uplink ports is just plugged into my main network, so I can access this network switch. So I don't have anything else plugged in right now that has PoE, but if there is, there would have this little icon here for PoE. It's just a quick view to see like what are the speeds and if they're using power or not, just from this quick menu option up here. So you can just hide that and show that at any point in time. Off to the left here are the main menu options. You can click on this top hamburger menu button here to actually expand out the names of these menus. So what I'm going to do is kind of look through some of these menus just real quickly. I'm not going to do a full walkthrough in this video, but in future videos I'll show how to like configure VLANs and different things like that. But for now, we'll just kind of see what's available. Right here you can see you have some statistics that you can look at for your network switch. And then configure is probably where you do most of your stuff for your configuration for your network switch, for your layer 2 and layer 3 configuration, because you have VLANs and link aggregation and a little bit of some quality of service, and you can do firmware upgrades, and there's some system setting updates right here that you can do. Analyze just has some logs you can look at. And then we have people to configure users for the network switch, and then security you can set up like port security, radius servers. Some of you guys run radius in your network. I'm not sure how many of you use port security, locking down some of your ports and stuff. You could do that if you want to get really hardcore about not allowing random people to plug into your network switch. But I feel like for most home users, it's probably a little bit overkill for some of these settings that you have available. But these are designed to be for medium to enterprise businesses, so they should have all these kinds of settings, especially in here, that you'll be making use of, like spanning tree protocol and that sort of thing. If you have lots of network switches that you connect together for redundancy, you'll need to set up some of these type of settings. All right, so now I'm going to log into the other network switch, which I have up here. This one's actually considered to be a switch extender. So it's actually just a real basic, it's technically 5 ports, but one of the ports is your uplink and your power provided from another switch. So you really have 4 usable ports on this network switch. The same username and password is used here for admin and password. Notice when you log into here, it actually doesn't force you to change your password. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if you can change this via the cloud or not, because right here, you notice there's no way to change your password. I'm not sure where you actually do that at, because I looked at this a little bit ago, and if you look in here, it's not obvious where your password change can be at. So we'll see once I get further in this process to see if we can change the password somewhere so you're not using the defaults. Like with the other network switch, there's an icon at the top here that you can click on and see the devices that are connected to your network switch. The first one is the PoE uplink port that's used to power the entire switch. So you'll see this uplink icon, but you won't see the PoE icon because that's actually just powering the entire switch. This PoE icon is useful for other devices that are connected here. And I have a Raspberry Pi here and 2 wireless access points. This one here I just plugged in, so it hasn't fully connected yet. But I'm actually going to try the 2 different EnGenius access points on this switch and see how it goes, or plug it into the other switch. But you'll see that this one has a PoE icon on it. So it's actually pretty cool. You can see the speeds and different things here at a quick glance. But you notice there's not really a lot of stuff to look at here. We already looked at device status. That's where we're on. That's the default page. If we go to port status, you can see which VLANs and stuff this is on. Since I haven't configured anything yet, it's all on the untagged VLAN 1. But let's go to local settings and see what we have here. You can change the system name and some IP addresses that you need to select here. And you can set the management VLAN, whatever you want that to be. And then we go to port configuration, and you can see which ones are on different VLANs here. And that's all there is to the web interface for these 2 switches. One thing I want to point out before I add the switches to the EnGenius Cloud account is the fact that I tried connecting 2 of the wireless access points they sent me for a previous review to that switch extender, and I found that I had trouble running both at the same time. And I realized that the PoE port that's on that switch extender is a PoE++ port, which means it can support up to 60 watts. But the switch they sent me is only a PoE+, and also the Grandstream switches that I also own are also just PoE+. So I don't actually have any PoE++ switches on my network, so I can't actually test it out at full power. So with PoE+, you can only max out at 30 watts. But interestingly, if you look here, I plugged both of the access points to the 8-port switch that has a higher power budget of 130 watts. And you can see that the 2 access points are only taking up like a little over 6.5 watts each. That's only like 13, 14 watts. And then the switch extender itself is actually 2.3 watts. So together, it's only like, 15, 16 watts of power usage. So I'm not quite sure why I can't plug both those devices in. I should still have 30 watts, total, and I'm only using half of that. So that's one thing I want to keep in mind, that if you want to take full advantage of that switch extender, you need a PoE++ switch that supports that higher power distribution. So I'm wondering if there's a little bit of overhead there that it doesn't like going past. So that's something that it might be a little bit of a gotcha there, because you might only be able to run 1 PoE device or 2 if they're depending on how much power consumption is being used on this switch extender if you're only using a PoE+ connection to that switch extender. I'm now signed into my EnGenius Cloud account, and I'm going to add the 2 network switches to show you how that process works. I'm going to use my phone to make that happen so that I can just add it via the QR code. If you're going to use the QR code, I recommend you do it before you plug everything into your switches, because they put the QR code on the bottom of the devices. So it's best to do it before you plug in your device, so you can go ahead and add it to your account. And then whenever you power the device online, it'll show up in the dashboard here, because it keeps track if they're online or offline based on the connection to the internet. So I actually didn't do that because I wanted to test the web interface first. So it's going to be a little bit tricky for me to use the app. So I'm going to open the app up if I can find it. As you can see, I'm signed into my EnGenius Cloud to Go app, and I'm going to scan the bottom of my device. I'm going to hit there's a plus button that says register device, and I'm going to scan the bottom of my switch extender because it's at my desk. So I do that one first. So I added my switch. It should show up in the dashboard soon. Once I click register, I can name the device. I'll just leave it at the default. Okay, and then there's a button to assign it to the network. I only have one network defined that I uniquely called it network at the top here. Now that we've added it, let's go to the inventory page, and you should be able to see I have the switch extender in there, so that's cool. And I think it's assigned, it's assigned to my network that I called network. And I wonder, eventually it'll probably show up in the dashboard. Maybe there's a little bit of a delay there. So while recording this video, I realized why my switch extender is not showing up with the switch on the switches page right here. Notice it's not here because I realized there is another menu called switch extender. So it's actually on its own page. So it did add it properly to this page, which is great. So I was a little bit worried about it. For some reason, it actually doesn't show up on the dashboard. And I'm wondering if it's because this category is just for switches, whereas the switch extender is in its own category, so it doesn't really show up in here. But in my opinion, it's you're kind of using it as a switch extender is the terminology. It's really just another switch that's powered by a PoE switch, right? So, but it would be nice if it would show up in this dashboard here, so you could see all your switches in this dashboard. But it's not a huge deal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my other network switch to my cloud account. So I'll show you how to do it via serial number, because I already have mine in the rack, and it makes it hard on myself to try to take it out just to scan the QR code on the bottom. So let's have to go down here to inventory and license, and I can register a device, and I can type in the serial number. There we go. And then all I have to do is just hit done, and now I have both of my switches in here. I can actually name this because it didn't put a name in there. I'll just name it the same as the model number. And let's go back to the dashboard. It looks like it hasn't shown that we have switches online here yet. I can add this one in there, so that's cool. So if I do that, if I go back to the dashboard, I got one switch in there. So that's all you need to do to add your devices to the cloud. It's basically the same process as setting up your access points on the cloud. You just scan the QR code or type a serial number in, and you'll have it in this nice little dashboard here. Now that I got the switches added to the cloud account, I'm going to show you around the web interface a little bit, because it's different than the standalone web interface for the network switches. Speaking of the standalone web interface, I noticed once I added the switches to the cloud account that it locked out the configuration on the local web interface. So that means once you add the switches to the cloud account, you primarily have to manage it from the cloud, which I thought was interesting because there's other vendors that you can manage it both ways, and it just synchronizes the configuration. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Once you configure your devices in the cloud, you have to continue doing so. And as you can see over here, we have the manage menu, the configure menu, analyze. And this is NSky account. This is user or add license page. Down here, there's a scheduled reports page, and some org chart, org member stuff for your organization. And there's an inventory license page down here. The inventory license page I've clicked on before. I showed you, it lists all your devices that you have available, and you can organize them by different networks here. I accidentally clicked up top. But if you go on this, we're on the dashboard right now, and you can look at like access points, and you can see the access points listed. You can see the switches that we have. If you have any gateways, which I don't have any, and then you got switch extenders, which I have one of those. And then you can see the topology of your network, which is similar to Unify, how they kind of graph out your network for you, which is pretty cool. The network I have here is not very complex because they sent me 2 switches and 2 access points. I just have them all connected there. You can see I have these 2 access points connected to the main 8-port PoE switch, and then I have that switch extender off there, which is at my desk right now. If you highlight this, it's kind of cool. It tells you which port is connected to each of the devices and how much bandwidth is being used. If we go back to this manage page, we have map and floor plans, kind of similar to Unify. They're doing that as well. So you can see, oh, it's taking me to New York. It's not where I live. VPN status, clients. If you have any VPNs, I don't have any VPN set up. This shows you the clients. I have one client connected on here. And let's see, configure. This lets you configure your SSIDs, which I showed you in a different video how to do that. And let's see, switches. This is like general switch configuration. It's not individual switch configuration. Like if I go to system protocols, this kind of tells me some general settings for all my switches that you can enable or change. And let's see, let's go to gateway. Gateway is if you have, a gateway device, which I don't from EnGenius. So they have VPNs and firewall configuration there. I can't really show you that because I don't have any devices. And firmware allows you to set up your firmware update schedules for your AP switches and gateways and switch extenders. And let's see, let's go back to here. I keep clicking on the wrong menu. Then there's some alerts you can set up, and this is where you configure VLANs, as I clicked on at one point in time to show you can go over here to add VLANs to your devices. And client access control. This would be different rules and VIP lists and stuff, block lists you can enable on here. Users are users for your cloud account, cloud users. So you can set them up there, and then you got some general settings for your account. One thing I thought was kind of interesting when I clicked on manage the switches here, they have this diagnostics view, and when you click on it, it opens up all these pages where you can start doing all these different diagnostic tests, which is kind of interesting. You can do cable testing, you can see activity of current network, you can click over to some of these other pages to do trace routes and stuff. It's kind of interesting how these pages just kind of flip in here. So it's kind of a cool little web interface. You can see your pings and stuff to different websites. If you click on the switches here too, you can actually see all the ports, what's being used, what some settings and stuff are between the different devices. I can even do that on the switch extender page as well. If I click on it, I can see that I have one device plugged into this. And you can get a quick view of all the stuff that's going on with your network with this stuff. I hope you like this quick little tour just to show you what the cloud interface, the cloud account looks like. So I'm glad that EnGenius sent me these switches over, even though I already have some PoE switches, but I like evaluating different vendors' products to see how they actually have their stuff configured and laid out and how you actually manage all these devices. Because not every product is going to work best for every person, right? So these products might work better for you than other people, and so I like having that information available, and I love having these switches because it allows me to test out their ecosystem, and it gives me the ability to show you how to do VLANs on different vendor switches. So you have a lot of examples to look at when configuring VLANs, and if you happen to be using the same products, you even have a one-to-one guide right on configuring VLANs for your product. So I hope you found this video useful. I'm going to continue doing these different videos if I get new products in that I can review. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.